Have you ever thought about why science fiction spaceships look nothing like the real ones? They can be used as many times as you want, they lift off effortlessly and they look spectacular. The Millennium Falcon or the USS Enterprise could not be more different than rockets like the Saturn V, the Space Shuttle, or any other that has ever existed. Until now. Starship. It may not look like the science fiction ships, but it will have the most important thing in common with them. It will be used as many times as we want, or at least this is the idea. It may not seem like a big thing, but this is going to change humanity's future in space, and we are going to see how. You most likely already know this, but just in case, Starship is the current rocket that SpaceX is developing. It is still in a testing stage, and hopefully in the following months it will start launching more frequently. But the important part about this new rocket is that it is designed to be fully and rapidly reusable, which would be the first of its kind and anywhere in space operations. Until now, rockets have always been fully disposable, with some exceptions like the Space Shuttle and the Falcon family, but even those are not fully reusable, only partially, and they are very inefficient in comparison. Imagine that every time you go for a ride with your car, you will need to buy a new one, or pay 30% of the initial cost. Almost no one would drive a car, and the only ones driving would be very rich people. And that is exactly what has been happening in the space launch business for the past 60 years, and that is what the Starship is going to change. This rocket will not only be the biggest and most powerful rocket ever created, but it will also be the first that can be used over and over again, without spending a lot of money and time in repairs or inspections. Just this thing will bring costs down by an order of magnitude, as you wouldn't need to build a new rocket each time. We may not have science fiction spaceships yet, but it will be very close to that and much more effective than the rockets that we currently have. But if this is so game-changing, why has it not been done before? Why are we still throwing rockets into the ocean after a single use? Basically because it is very hard. And there has never been a real incentive to build a rocket like this. It is not like we are launching thousands of them each day. With this type of demand, building reusable rockets was not a necessary idea, and it could have been an expensive and overkill investment. But this has recently changed. We are launching more and more satellites into space each year, and we plan to have bases on the Moon and Mars. So we will need something better than disposable or partially reusable rockets. We need rockets that behave like a car, or like a plane, where basically you only pay for the propellant. Without that, we can put some things in space, but nothing like the futuristic scenarios shown in science fiction. So, now that we have the necessity, what is SpaceX doing differently that allows this rocket to be finally real? For starters, they have already revolutionized the space industry with the Falcon family, bringing down costs, creating the first partially reusable rockets, and designing the vehicles in a simple way that allows for a bigger production and launch rates. And most importantly, they have the demand and the need for this new rocket. And that's the key. It is very risky to spend a lot of money on a vehicle that you don't know if it will be needed, or that you don't know if the profit generated will cover all the necessary expenses. But SpaceX does not have this problem, or to be more specific, they have solved this problem, and the solution is called Starlink. Starlink is a low Earth orbit satellite constellation that provides internet to every corner of the world that fiber and 5G cannot access. It is also the primary payload that SpaceX is currently sending to space. In the last 2 years, more than half of their launches have been dedicated to sending Starlink satellites into orbit. So, by building a product alongside their launch business, SpaceX has effectively created its own demand, and this product is on track to surpass the launch business in revenue and profit, if it hasn't already. This has also affected the Falcon 9 rocket, as it would have not launched all the times it had if it weren't for the high demand for Starlink. And with the new version 2 satellites that will be bigger, more capable, and that can only be launched by Starship, they will have all the demand that they need and more. I won't bore you with the details, you can pause the video if you want to check the numbers yourself, but summarizing, the current business model with the Falcon 9 is already profitable, and with the Starship and the Satellite V2 satellites, it will be even better. So, to sum up, they will be saving money by launching the Starlink V2 satellites with the Starship instead of using the Falcon 9, and they will also have the luxury to be able to lose some of them in the landing while they perfect the technique. Only with the demand and revenue that Starlink will provide, Starship would already be a good investment for SpaceX, but the best part is that they have more reasons to build it. The other major achievement that Starship must make is to land NASA astronauts to the Moon, for which they will receive $4 billion from NASA contracts. And to send these astronauts, Starship will need to refill in orbit, so SpaceX will also need to send a bunch of ships while they learn how to transfer big loads of methane and oxygen from ship to ship, something that has never been done before on such a big scale. Basically, they will have plenty of opportunities to learn how to launch and land this vehicle, while they learn all the necessary things to send Starship to the Moon. And last, but not least, you cannot colonize Mars without a fully reusable rocket like Starship. The amount of mass that will be needed for something like this is immense, and if you want to do something like this in a sustainable manner, you will need to first lower the cost to send mass to orbit. And going to Mars is the whole goal for SpaceX and Elon, which may not work or it may take a lot longer than they expect, but in the meantime they will be creating a rocket ship that will revolutionize the space economy and our capabilities. So, they have the knowledge and the technology. In fact, they are the only ones with a real chance to accomplish this milestone, as they are the only ones landing boosters and also the best aerospace company overall. They have already developed most of the hardware, they have all the economic and human resources to build it, and finally, they also have the demand for a product like this to exist and to make everything else obsolete. Then, what comes next? What new things will this rocket allow us to do? Is it really a game-changer development or just another rocket to send bigger satellites to orbit? Even if Starship were a disposable rocket, it would still be the best rocket on the planet, capable of putting 100 tons to low Earth orbit and with a payload volume of 1,000 cubic meters. There is no other rocket that is even close to these numbers. And as they will be producing it at a big scale, it would also be cheaper than its competitors even if it were expendable. Then, once you start considering the economics of reusing not only the booster like the Falcon 9, but also the second stage, you are talking about a completely different rocket, something that resembles more to an airplane than to anything that existed before. It's true that all of this is not real right now. Starship has only launched once, and even though it cleared the path and it went up to 40 kilometers, it had a lot of failures, and it is still not clear how many attempts they will need to put it into orbit, and how many more until they are able to land it effectively. But that's how SpaceX does things. They iterate constantly and try things before they are confident that they will work. As they say, failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. The important part is that there is no big issue left in order to make it a reality. It just needs some time until we have a fully reusable vehicle that is capable of sending 100 tons to orbit for less money than it costs today to send 1 ton. And that is the biggest impact it will have, not to send the same things, but to send bigger, simpler and cheaper things. Because, although it might sound counterintuitive, building something bigger and heavier to be put into space would be cheaper, in the same way that the most expensive bicycles are the lightest ones. That's because until now, every gram of weight you put into a satellite is very expensive to transport into orbit. But not anymore. The amount of time, money and thought that are spent today in order to make satellites smaller and lighter is immense, and once we are not limited by mass or volume, we can start building things way cheaper and far better than what we have today. Just think of the James Webb Space Telescope. It weighs around 6 tons and it costs 10 billion to build and launch because in part, NASA needed to make it very light and foldable. But if the same telescope was able to weigh 10 times more and had bigger volume available, it would have been way easier to build, far more capable and probably cheaper. Space is hard. It's as hard as it can be. There is an infinite number of things that can go wrong and an infinite amount of problems to solve, but all of these problems can be solved with more mass. For example, you have radiation problems, send more insulation. You need to go faster, bring more propellant. You need more resolution in your telescope, build bigger mirrors. And that's the turning point, being able to build without the volume and mass restrictions we've always had in space. It will completely change the way satellites, space telescopes, and space stations are built, and it will add capabilities that we didn't know that existed. We will change the types of things we send to space and the way we move things once there, like the different luggage you will bring to a trip if instead of walking to the destination you go by car. It will be completely different and start anywhere of space activities, anywhere that will finally make science look like fiction. Take care and learn more.